I'm Jane McCallion.
And I'm Adam Shepherd.
And you're listening to the ITPro Podcast. Now, over the last year, we've talked a lot on this show about going back to the office, whether we want to go back at all, how to manage the split between home working and being in the office, and how to avoid culture shock.
Most people agree that hybrid working is the way forward, but we've still got a way to go in terms of figuring out the best way to manage a hybrid workforce. For HR platform remote.com, however, the answer was somewhat unusual. They've turned to virtual reality as a way of bringing their staff together without having to rely on Zoom calls or face-to-face meetings. We're joined this week by Nadia Vatalidis, Remote's Director of People, to learn more about how it's using VR technology to navigate the hybrid office. Nadia, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Great. It's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, as the name suggests, Remote is a company that is no stranger to flexible and hybrid working. Can you tell us a little bit about what Remote does and how it's set up?
Yeah, and this is part of the reason I joined Jane. Remote is a platform and a company that allows organizations to hire people in multiple countries in the world. We currently have 40 entities around the world and aiming towards 85 by the end of the year. And wherever someone wants to hire, we do all the rest, all the compliance, all the legal aspects, the contracts, the payroll, literally everything else. This brings two key things to organizations and to people, right? So the first thing is it brings the opportunity to hire everywhere. And that means out of your immediate 30 kilometer sort of radius of where you would usually just have an office and just hire talent in that radius. So it brings incredible diverse talent and workforce to organizations. But the other part, which I'm most passionate about, is it brings opportunities to people that would have never been able to work for organizations that are either a Silicon Valley startup or an amazing UK-based company that's just started out or that's expanding. So I think the opportunities it brings to people is even more, and that excites me. And it excites me about the future of work in general.
So in terms of the geographic distribution of Remote's team, how kind of spread out are you guys?
We currently have employees in more than 40 countries already in the world. I'm talking about here in South Africa, Kenya, all over Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific, the UK, all over Europe, as well as the US. So it's pretty much really everywhere, including Latin regions. And we've been very fortunate that as we continue this journey, a lot of people are quite attracted to work for us. So we're even getting applications from places, that I would have never even imagined that are applying. So higher up in Africa, we're getting some really interesting applications as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it sounds like you do kind of deal with one of the aspects that I think is kind of coming more to people's minds now, which is, for example, I work for Dennis Publishing. They're a UK-based company. If I wanted to move to picking a country at random, France, so the tax and legal implications of that for me and for Dennis. So is that something that you would help your customers with as well?
Yes, we can even offer sponsorship in some locations, but remote working isn't accepted by all and every sort of governmental and political institution yet. And so interestingly enough, eligibility for work is still a thing. And so unless if you're not eligible to work, we will go and do a background check to check if we could apply for eligibility and potential sponsorship. The sponsorship side is way harder than I think people imagine if you don't have any offices anywhere in the world. But if the organization you'll be working for does have a brick and mortar location, that could make it slightly easier. And so, yeah, we would literally do everything. We would also then run a local payroll and make sure that there's no sort of risk in terms of the timing and how long you're spending in a specific country over another.
So right now, many organizations are grappling with the complexities of returning to a hybrid office. How do you manage teams when some of them are, in a different location, some of them are working from home, in your case, some of them are in a different country altogether. Your approach has been a little bit more unusual than most, I think it's fair to say. Talk us through your VR strategy.
Great question. When we started bringing VR on, I wasn't even at Remote yet, but I really liked that this is the type of creative and innovative environment where you can basically test just about any type of technology. And a key reason to bring it on is, one, there's a real social connection in VR that I don't think everyone has even thought about. But there's various reasons why we did this, right? We wanted to have a very intentional opportunity to build social connection. And if you think about, and I hope I pronounced this properly because my Afrikaans accent always interferes, proximal chat, so that proximity of how you talk to people in VR. If you move away from someone, like if you're in a cocktail bar, you would stop hearing them, right? And if you move closer, you will start hearing them. And video conferencing can't replicate that yet. And so that does make it extremely social and real. I've spoken about this before, but I really like how a avatar also has this way of highlighting the diversity in an environment and how everyone recreates themselves and what people look like and how different everyone is. And I think now in Pride Month, I think that's a really cool thing to sort of call out. There's something about VR that is just different in terms of social connection. So I love the aspect of having the opportunity to get together in a space like that. And it really feels like you're taking a break from the real world for a minute, especially still during sort of being still stuck in the pandemic. We've done a couple of events in December. They even had a mini year-end function in VR, which was really successful. We've grown a lot since then. So we've also run into some really fun challenges in terms of shipping these headsets across the globe or trying to purchase them locally.
So tell us a little bit about kind of what you're actually doing with VR. What are you, firstly, what headsets are you using? How are you allocating them to staff? How are you rolling them out? And what are you actually kind of using them for on a day-to-day basis?
We ship Oculus Quest 2 VRs headsets to everyone at Remote. I have to talk about the growth that we've had for you to understand the challenges we run into. When I joined Remote, Adam, we were 75 people. Today, in June, we're now 220 people. We've hired more than that already. That's still joining all the way up till October. So that's been exceptional hypergrowth this year. And for that reason, we haven't been able to ship as fast as what we hoped. In fact, we often run into really fun logistical issues, which is not just to do with logistics, but even the way certain payment platforms work and how many devices you can order, right? So we often even get blocked by very large online websites where you can purchase these type of things. So we've had an interesting journey in terms of shipping these devices. Something we did do is our sales kickoff earlier this year. We used these Oculus Quest 2 VR sets in some of those kickoff events. Furthermore, we're actually currently looking at creating a remote rec room, and we want to customize it fully. I have a small fun video that I can even link to you and share with you after this call to show you what that would look like, which I'm incredibly excited about. And this was just like early stage playing around. How can we take this further? We want to be way more intentional about this in future, and we're thinking around, if we keep running into not being able to ship these fast enough, we are going to still have these events and let folks join via 2D on Mac. We all use Mac at Remote. So great opportunities to, instead of waiting for everyone to have a device, we'll always fall behind. We're going to start continuing. And some folks will join 3D, some will join 2D until they have their devices. So that's one that I'm incredibly excited about. We are also starting our learning and development journey. Unlike most startups, we wanted to start this really early on, especially our leadership enablement program. And we just kicked our first leadership enablement program off globally. The next one, I'd really like to include VR in a few sessions. And I think it does create a certain social connection and opportunity to use it in a completely different type of classroom setup or training setup. An enablement type setup. So really keen to do more of that in the next few months to come. We're currently looking for a learning and development specialist that is less traditional, that's looking for opportunities to really sort of disrupt the learning space a little bit and utilize amazing technology like this in future. And then we've been challenged very recently by someone in my team that he runs our documentation and internal communications. He's crazy about VR. He loves, spending time on it. He's the one that's building out a fun rec room at the moment. He actually challenged our bridge team to sign up for an opportunity where the bridge team join something like a Star Trek game, and we utilize that 30 minutes as social connection and team bonding. And the executive team at Remote is called Bridge, which is named after this one of the sort of Star Trek levels. And we want to utilize that to actually show the rest of the organization a little bit about the leadership team, and literally even hopefully make that publicly available due to our transparency value. So super excited about pulling that off the ground. And I think it will be a real opportunity and like a bonding. If that works, we want to do way more team bonding, especially in smaller groups across the organization and in different things like that.
I have to say, as a minor Trekkie myself, that sounds very, very cool. I know exactly the game that you're talking about, and the concept of using that for kind of like executive team building, I think, is super cool and something that never would have even occurred to me. And I think that's a really neat way to do kind of corporate team building, in general, but particularly with remote staff. And I also love that the leadership team is called the Bridge Crew. That makes me very happy in an extremely nerdy way.
Yeah, I really like it too. It really does bring it even brings some sort of fun and engagement to this whole executive name, right? It does bring a little bit of fun, and it does bring us I nearly want to say sort of more available to folks and more approachable, because it's no longer like the executive sort of C-level group. So I really like that as well.
It does sound to me, listening to the story of how you are using VR and all the different contexts in which you're using it, that this could be a really key consideration actually for one of the main problems with hybrid working. There will be some people who want to go back into the office most of the time. There will be some people who don't, who want to be at home all of the time or most of the time, or just not in the office. And this has raised the question already of how do you kind of meld those two worlds together if you need an all hands meeting or whatever. So do you think that VR is possibly the key to bringing those two groups together if you all pop on a headset, irrespective of whether you're in the office or at home, and you can hold a meeting which is more of a level playing field than if you're trying to mix and match, in the office and video conferencing, or ensure that everybody is in the office at the same time?
Yeah, so like highlighting that what we've just been through was remote forced for a lot of organizations. It wasn't remote first, right? And I don't think organizations even thought about social connection. And if they did, it would have been another Zoom call or another sort of meeting style type environment. I think if you're going hybrid and you're going remote first, you have a unique opportunity to be very intentional about social connection. And you have to be, especially if folks aren't together anymore. They can't walk past each other. They can't see what's on each other's desks. They don't really know what you're into anymore. They don't know how someone is sort of growing in their life, career, personality, in even technology. So what's their sort of latest interest, etc. So I think VR gives you this unique opportunity where you're sort of taken out of that work setting for a minute into an environment that feels very real, and very engaging and very sociable. It also takes the work side away, meaning you cannot be sending an email while you're wearing a VR headset, right? So it's a real opportunity to completely disconnect.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of organizations have sort of missed that piece about, hey, we've got to be intentional about bonding time. It can't just be another meeting.
Yeah. I don't know anybody who would be sending emails or on the company messaging platform or anything like that while they're trying to have a meeting. It's
Actually,
definitely not something that I have done in the past.
I'm feeling very called out right now.
I think it's more obvious because now people's microphones are right next to the keyboard, so you can't kind of sneakily do anything. You're a tap 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 tap
Mm.
tap 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 very
Well,
loudly.
especially not if, like me, you have a mechanical keyboard and even quiet typing sounds like a machine gun going off. It's a dead giveaway every time.
So, Nadia, you've mentioned some of the logistical challenges in particular that you've faced. Have there been any other, sort of difficulties that you have had with implementing VR, whether that's, acceptance or compatibility, or, I mean, it's been a while since I tried a VR headset, but the first generation lot just didn't fit my head because I've got a dainty lady head. And a lot of first generation stuff is created and modeled on men, so it's like a giant helmet rattling around on my head. So are there any of those kinds of problems that you've faced at all?
we've not faced people not wanting to be part of this. In fact, instead, we often get messages about, when is my headset arriving? How are we doing? Is there sort of a tracking number? So no, the acceptance here has been incredible. I also want to say, the people that work at Remote truly does believe in remote first work practices. They're fully ingrained into our values. We've built an environment based on these values. And so this is probably not for everyone. Not everyone wants to work from home permanently. I certainly do. And the folks that work here really does. And so I think the emotional maturity around why we bring technology on board is very accepted. And I think it's because we test technology so often and we're obsessed with latest tech. It's also an environment that uses other really cool tech for other things, right, daily. And so I think coming into this environment, even if you're from a very traditional company, being open to that is sort of part of the requirements to work here. And that adaptability is key. We've never had to force anyone to join anything. And if certainly if someone doesn't want to, it's always opt in, opt out, like totally open to that. We've had folks that has even had their very first coffee chat and first meet and greet in VR, which I thought was really cool. And a really different opportunity to connect as your first call in a remote environment. So there's a lot of other things I think it brought during the pandemic. And this is what I wanted to touch on earlier, but I'm going to deep dive into this just briefly. A lot of people felt very isolated, right? And with this headset, not only have they got the opportunity to use it with us as a company, but you can use it for anything you like. And so a couple of our colleagues, many of them, are actually utilizing it for sports at the moment and to stay active. And so we had folks that maybe have never played tennis and all of a sudden they're becoming like a mini pro at tennis in VR. And it's also an incredible workout. Beat Saber is a total favorite amongst all remoters.
Of course.
And they fully enjoy that. But something else that really stood out to me is one of our colleagues that lives in Europe. Her parents are in the US. And she visited them earlier this year with her VR. So she took her VR with, and she's been telling them you should get a VR headset. And they used hers once and they absolutely loved it. They thought it was completely insane and they were extremely excited about what it does and how unique it was and the experience, that they both bought headsets. And they now FaceTime, now that she's back in Europe, they FaceTime together, right? And I think that's really cool. It's an opportunity to do something, and they play games together. She said what's really strange is sometimes when she phones them, they're using VR without her. And she finds that incredible. I mean, that's her parents that's much older than her and that's sort of living in a different era. So I do think there's an opportunity here for us to, we haven't seen folks not wanting to opt in or feeling a little bit intimidated by it. And we have great video content about it. Sean on my team is amazing about creating more and more guidelines on how to use it. And then even just, a guideline like, hey, go on to first steps the very first time you get your headset and you're going to get the opportunity to understand how to use everything and how to press and pick up. And my 11-year-old taught me, right? I had no idea what I was doing. And he basically put the headset on and figured it out in 5 minutes and said, okay, you need to go into first steps and then you'll figure this out. So I think that's been really cool. And I don't know if one of you, Adam or Jane, have been on Google Earth on a VR headset. That's a really cool experience. It's literally like walking in mountains or visiting another country. I think that brought a completely different dynamic to loneliness during the pandemic. So that's been really cool to see.
Yeah, the ecosystem around VR is really starting to mature now. You're getting the really cool kind of experiences like, Google Earth and all of the arts and culture stuff that Google is doing kind of in that area. But you're also getting, some genuinely polished and useful collaboration and business tools, which are kind of designed for VR. One of the ones that I've been most impressed by has been kind of Vive Sync, which is HTC's remote collaboration thing, which is, essentially just like a virtual meeting room, which is a really polished implementation of that concept. But you've got more and more of those kinds of solutions that are, that are out there and are available,
Yeah, I haven't tested that. I'm like dying to just type it down and write it down. So, yeah, that sounds super interesting and probably exactly what we want to utilize in our training even.
We can send you a link and indeed put a link in the show notes to Adam's opinion piece on that. I went to a meeting in VR and it felt like the future, I believe is the headline, but we shall find out.
It is, and it did. So on that note, what led you to invest specifically in the Oculus Quest? Kind of as ITPro's resident VR nerd, I'm always curious as to what attracts people to kind of one platform over the other.
The two founders realized that the organization was growing really rapidly, and we were adding dozens of people. We still are currently to the environment, and I think they wanted to be really intentional about that fun factor, that social connection, and what that can do in future, right? And it sort of very nicely aligns with future of work. And I think our type of environment is continuously challenging the status quo, and I think this is part of that. We are utilizing something like VR, but we're also continuously testing all kinds of other fun apps and technology. And I think we'll continue to do so. And being allowed in this environment and also to fail at it, for instance, the challenge around shipping at a stage has been really great. It's been great to feel sort of still trusted and continuously find great solutions and having the space to do so. So that's really the key factor on why. Our CTO is really into gaming as well. He's a huge Star Trek fan. And so is our CEO, Joop. So they're both, fully into gaming themselves. We have a lot of people at Remote that loves gaming and spends weekends, gaming their time away. And that's what helps them relax. And so it really suited our environment and what we're building here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So are you planning to invest more in VR technology going forward?
I think we are. I think the first challenge is we need to move a little faster in getting headsets to everyone. And now that we've explored a little bit with 2D combined with VR sets, so using Mac or even iPhones, etc., combined with an Oculus VR for some, I think we're going to move a little faster in terms of utilizing VR more. But I think the paid apps and opportunities to potentially build in VR is there. One of our engineers has actually started building a little bit in VR, not for Remote. That's a side project and sort of a hobby of his, and that excites me. So I think there's real opportunity to invest a little bit more and to start utilizing it way more for meetings, as I said, learning and development, and other key sort of social events that we want to host. And that will be mostly internal. I can imagine it would feel a little, if someone doesn't have a headset externally, it would be hard to join. So it will be mostly focused internally for now.
So, what advice would you give to any organisation that's thinking of implementing VR, but they haven't taken the plunge yet?
Great question. I would highly encourage organizations that are either hybrid or remote first to be way more intentional about social connection, but also utilizing technology like VR to include everyone. It's a real opportunity where you can sort of take the barrier away from in-office versus virtual, and an awesome opportunity to connect and engage.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this week, but thank you once again to Remote's Nadia Vatalidis for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Jane and Adam. Really enjoyed our conversation today.
You can find links to all of the topics we've spoken about today in the show notes and even more on our website, itpro.co.uk.
You can also follow us on Twitter, where we are at ITPro, as well as Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram.
Don't forget to subscribe to the ITPro Podcast wherever you find podcasts, and if you're enjoying the show, leave us a rating and a review. We'll be back next week with more analysis from the world of IT, but until then, goodbye.
Bye.
The ITPro Podcast is brought to you by the Dennis Podcast Network.